Flames hot enough to melt skin, invisible gases that destroy your lungs from the inside out, and a single bomb capable of erasing an entire city. Today, we are breaking down and reacting to some of the deadliest weapons in human history and their horrifying impact on the human body from a medical standpoint. Alright, let's dive right in. Number 5. Flamethrowers. Throughout history, warfare has constantly evolved. Spears became swords, swords became guns, and eventually humanity created something that honestly sounds like it came straight out of a nightmare. Now, surprisingly, early versions of flamethrower-like weapons actually date all the way back to the Byzantine Empire around the 7th century, where a terrifying substance known as Greek fire was used in naval warfare. This mysterious chemical mixture could supposedly continue burning even on water. However, the modern flamethrower, as we think of it today, really emerged during World War I and became especially feared during World War II, where countries like Germany, the United States, and Japan all used variations of these weapons in combat. And psychologically, few weapons inspired fear quite like this one. Now, medically speaking, flamethrowers cause devastating thermal burns capable of destroying skin, muscle tissue, nerves, and sometimes even bone. And your skin isn't there just to look pretty, it's your body's protective barrier. Once large areas are destroyed, the body rapidly loses fluids and becomes extremely vulnerable to infection. Victims often suffered 3rd and 4th degree burns where damage extended deep below the skin, sometimes leaving tissue blackened and dead. But honestly, one of the deadliest injuries wasn't always the burns themselves. It was airway damage. Inhaling superheated air and smoke could rapidly swell the throat and lungs shut, making it nearly impossible to breathe. As an ER doctor, mass burn casualties are still one of the hardest situations imaginable even today. Number 4, machine guns. Okay, next up, we have a weapon that completely transformed warfare forever and honestly changed the scale of human casualties in a way the world never really had seen before. Now, before machine guns existed, warfare looked very different. Large groups of soldiers would literally charge directly at one another across open battlefields using rifles that often required manual reloading after every shot. Combat was brutal, of course, but there were still limits to how quickly one person could inflict damage. Then came the machine gun, and suddenly those limits basically disappeared. The first truly successful fully automatic machine gun was invented in 1884 by Hiram Maxim and became known as the Maxim gun. This terrifying invention could fire hundreds of rounds per minute using recoil power to constantly reload itself, which at the time was revolutionary and horrifying. And once World War I began, the machine gun rapidly became one of the deadliest weapons on Earth. And medically speaking, the injuries were absolutely devastating. One thing movies often get wrong is that the bullets don't just create tiny holes through the body. High velocity rounds create something called decapitation, basically a shock wave cavity that damages tissue far beyond the bullet's direct path. Victims suffered shattered bones, destroyed arteries, collapsed lungs, spinal injuries, and massive internal bleeding. As an ER doctor, honestly, treating victims from a mass machine gun event would be incredibly difficult, even with modern medicine. Number 3, mustard gas and chemical warfare. Next up, we have a weapon that introduced an entirely new kind of nightmare to warfare because unlike bullets or explosions, sometimes victims didn't even realize they had been exposed until it was already far too late for them. Modern chemical warfare really exploded during World War I when nations began searching for ways to break the brutal stalemate of trench warfare. Despite the name, mustard gas is actually not really a gas at all. It's more of a chemical vapor and liquid agent capable of causing severe chemical burns both outside and inside the body. One of the most disturbing aspects of mustard gas was that symptoms were often delayed. Soldiers exposed to it might initially think they were okay, only to develop agonizing injuries hours later. It causes severe blistering burns to the skin. Large, fluid-filled blisters could develop across exposed areas of the body, but the external burns were only part of the problem. The real devastation often happened inside the lungs. When inhaled, mustard gas could severely damage the respiratory tract, leading to inflammation, bleeding, and destruction of airway lining. Victims developed intense coughing, chest pain, and difficulty breathing as fluid and damaged tissue accumulate inside the lungs. At the time, treatments for severe chemical airway injuries were extremely limited. And during World War I, doctors really struggled to fully understand what they were dealing with in real time. This was before advanced ventilators, before many modern respiratory treatments, and before modern hazmat protection. Number 2, biological weapons. Now, up until this point, the weapons we've talked about mostly relied on bullets, fire, or chemicals to inflict damage. But biological weapons are equally a force to be reckoned with. And what's wild? Some historians believe biological warfare may have caused more human suffering throughout history than almost any conventional weapon ever created. Biological warfare has existed for centuries. Ancient armies reportedly contaminated water supplies or launched infected corpses over city walls during sieges in an attempt to spread disease among enemy populations. One of the most infamous examples occurred during the 1300s when Mongol forces besieging the city of Kaffa may have catapulted plague-infected bodies into the city during the Black Death pandemic. Now, medically speaking, biological weapons are especially devastating because they attack the body at a microscopic level. Unlike traumatic injuries where doctors can physically see the damage, infections often begin silently before escalating into widespread systemic disease. And historically, that's exactly what made biological weapons so dangerous. Take plague, for example. Caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, plague can spread through flea bites or respiratory droplets depending on the form. Victims often developed fever, weakness, swollen lymph nodes, and in some cases septic shock, where infection spreads through the bloodstream, causing the body's organs to begin shutting down. Sometimes the true devastation didn't happen in hours or days, but over weeks, months, or even years as disease continued spreading through entire populations. Fortunately, international treaties now prohibit biological warfare, and many nations officially banned offensive bioweapon programs decades ago. But concerns still remain today because advances in science and biotechnology, now humanity has the ability to manipulate pathogens in ways previous civilizations could never. Number 1, nuclear weapons. Okay, our final and most devastating weapon to explore is one that completely changed human history forever. That's because it brought a level of destruction the world had never witnessed before. I hate to say it, but nothing else on this list even comes close. For the first time in history, humanity created a weapon capable of destroying entire cities within seconds. Now, the development of nuclear weapons began during World War II under a top-secret US research initiative known as the Manhattan Project. Scientists discovered that splitting atoms through nuclear fission released unimaginable amounts of energy. Then, on August 6, 1945, the United States dropped the atomic bomb Little Boy on Hiroshima, Japan. 3 days later, another bomb known as Fat Man was dropped on Nagasaki. Tragic doesn't even begin to describe things. And medically speaking, the injuries caused by nuclear weapons were on an entirely different level because these bombs didn't just harm the body one way. First became the blast wave itself. In fact, the explosion created a massive pressure wave capable of causing collapsed lungs, ruptured organs, internal bleeding, traumatic brain injuries, and victims being thrown through buildings and debris. Then came the thermal radiation. The heat was so intense that severe burns occurred miles away from the blast itself. And one of the most unsettling realities was that many people that survived the initial blast only to develop radiation sickness afterward. Radiation damages cells at the DNA level, especially fast-growing cells like bone marrow, hair follicles, and the gastrointestinal tract. And as an ER doctor, a large-scale nuclear event would overwhelm almost any healthcare system. Hospitals, power systems, medications, and emergency resources could all be destroyed within seconds, which means doctors would be forced into disaster triage, deciding who could realistically survive and who unfortunately could not. And that's an incredibly grim reality. Alright, hopefully I was able to provide some medical insight into these devastating weapons and the unimaginable impact they had on the human body throughout history. If you found this video interesting, be sure to check out this playlist right here for more medical and historical breakdowns just like this one. And of course, don't forget to subscribe, hit your like button, and turn on your notifications so you don't miss future videos. Thank you so much for watching, and stay healthy, my friends.